Today we're going to talk about something that seems normal, but like many seemingly normal things, might actually be causing more harm than it's worth. Grass lawns have endured a lot of public shaming in recent years. Podcasts like 99% Invisible have detailed the lawn's colonialist origins and classist and even borderline white supremacist connotations. And movements have been started to raise awareness of the wildflowers that would fill our yards if we just stopped tending to all that GD grass. But thankfully, we're in the midst of a lawn renaissance where people around the world are reconsidering how all that essentially lifeless green space can be used in ways that are better for us humans as well as other creatures and the climate. Do you or someone you know have a grass lawn? How much time and effort and money is spent trying to keep it pristine? What if that lawn could instead be a lush food forest, feeding both your family and the neighborhood's wildlife populations? What if your neighborhood were filled with wildflower meadows where butterflies floated happily between the flowers and the houses? What if the path away from water-guzzling, pointless lawns were easy, pretty cheap, and also fun? Here are some ideas. You don't have to do everything all at once. For example, we've lived in our house for about a year and a half, and de-lawnifying our yard is very much a work in progress, but we've slowly increased plant diversity as we've been able to, removing areas of grass as we go, and the ever-increasing accumulation of flowers, butterflies, and birds has been a complete joy. You also don't have to have a huge yard to implement some of these ideas. If you have even a tiny strip of grass that's in your control, consider how much more life it could support and how much more joy it could bring. Okay, so here are some ideas. Plant some fruit and/or nut trees native to your region. Native trees often support the most butterfly and moth caterpillars, meaning you'll have more butterflies, and you're also giving birds a great food source. Yum, yum, caterpillars. You'll also get to reap the harvest of delicious, basically free food from the fruits and nuts. We love trees because once established, they require very little upkeep and they can produce pounds upon pounds of food. See our video on tree crops for more on this. Look for ways to get trees for free. Most of the trees in our yard came from a local organization called Trees for Houston that aims to get more trees planted across the city by giving out native trees to anyone who wants them. Do some research and see if there are similar organizations in your area. The area around your new trees can also become a no-grass zone by simply creating mulched beds. And pro tip, you don't have to use real mulch. Our favorite free way to create beds is to upcycle bags of leaves that our neighbors put out for garbage collection. These leaves are great for a few reasons. They will eventually just break down into soil, and in the meantime, they're filled with caterpillars, and caterpillars equals more butterflies for our yard. To create our beds, we often just mulch right on top of the grass. We put down a layer of cardboard or newspaper, and then cover that with the leaf mulch. You're basically just covering the grass, so you're preventing the sunlight from reaching it. This means that the grass will die, and this protective layer will also prevent new grass from encroaching on your beds. Also keep expanding those beds. Every spring and fall, we eat up a little more of our lawn by expanding our leaf mulch beds and filling them with all the wildflower seeds we can. We sometimes buy our seeds, but most often we're sprinkling wildflower or native grass seeds that we've collected from parks and trails nearby. This is a free way to radically increase the biodiversity in your yard. Just make sure you're collecting seeds from native plants and not invasive ornamentals, which don't really do much for the ecosystem anyway. We use the iNaturalist app to help us identify plants we're interested in bringing into our yard. But seeds aren't the only way to bring new plants in. You can also experiment with making cuttings of interesting native plants, maybe that you find in a park or in a friend's yard. We'll link to a book that we found super helpful for info and ideas on cuttings and other propagation methods. And even easier than seeds or cuttings is just letting wild plants come up. When we first moved in, there were several areas around the edges of our lawn where the grass was already in pretty bad shape and some so-called weeds were starting to come in. We'd identify the plants coming up, remove anything that was invasive, and we discovered that when left to its own devices, our yard was going to become filled with flowers. Wild morning glories, asters, goldenrods, lilies, and all sorts of other beautiful and beneficial plants were popping up everywhere. And once someone stopped weeding them, they've really flourished, turning parts of our yard into proper wildflower patches, all with no effort on our part. So, like I said, we are very much still in the process of de-lawnifying ourselves, but the results have been so satisfying. Wildflowers and all the other diverse plants that we've added to the yard over time have attracted native bees, butterflies, and birds that we and our cats love to watch. Our once manicured and frankly boring suburban lawn is turning into a straight-up wildlife refuge, all while we're decreasing the time we have to spend mowing and the water we need to use. A quick note about homeowner associations or HOAs. We have one in our neighborhood and it blows. When we first started planting native trees and flowers, we got a ton of violation letters citing us for weeds and telling us that if we didn't remove them, we'd get fined. We've responded in a few ways. We send follow-up messages to the HOA detailing the specific plants that they called weeds. Dear HOA, these are not weeds, but majestic native wildflowers like sunflowers, sages, and rock roses. We've done some minor edging around the beds so that the line between the mulched wildflower areas and the grass looked a little tidier, and we've mostly just kept going. As our beds started to really grow in and the plants started to flourish, things looked objectively better and we stopped getting those violation letters. So just a word of caution, but also encouragement. Having an HOA doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a normal grass lawn, but it does mean that your journey might be a little bit more annoying. Sorry. But just imagine if everyone with control over some piece of dead, boring lawn decided to increase the biodiversity of their little piece of land. Imagine a world with homes surrounded by fields of wildflowers where butterflies and other pollinators fill the air, shaded by trees that provide free, nutritious food for the neighborhood, and where everyone isn't spending hours of time and stacks of money to maintain a lawn that does no good for anyone or anything anyway. What if our yards could be a net positive for our communities and ecosystems instead of massive resource and time sucks? Basically, just imagine how much more interesting and alive our neighborhoods would feel without all that boring grass. So, a call to action. Where can you disrupt the status quo and create more diversity in your world? Is there a yard or a piece of a yard or even just a public area you can get permission to plant native plants on? Try it out, watch the results, and share what you're up to in the comments. Or maybe you're already doing some of these things and you've learned about other better methods. Let us know what's working. Give us some suggestions for more biodiversity hacks in our own space, and together, let's make the world a little wilder and a little weirder.